So hi folks, today we're doing something very different than music or what this channel typically does. It's a little bit of an experiment. We're going to see how it works out. But over the course of the summer I grew a fairly significant amount of wheat in my garden, both in the front and in the back. And I did so in part because I was really curious about the process. I was curious about whether or not growing wheat was practical on a small scale. And I was also interested to see how a crop would do that didn't require so much work, because I didn't have so much time this summer to devote to gardening. And it turned out pretty well. I got a fairly significant amount, and I've been struggling for a few weeks to try to figure out a practical, inexpensive way to thresh and winnow the wheat, to extract the wheat berry, the edible part of the wheat, from the rest of the plant, the stalk and the chaff. And after doing some experimenting, after digging around on the internet, I think I found a solution that works pretty well on the small scale, and I'm making this video in the hopes that someone else who's looking for a solution to this problem might be able to draw some inspiration from it and make their own wheat at home. So the process that I've seen done on the internet typically involves using a coffee grinder or some small household grinder, nut grinder, to reduce the wheat down to its individual components, down to the wheat berries, down to the chaff, to break it all apart, to do the threshing. I tried this. I tried using a small coffee grinder, and it worked very well, but incredibly slowly. I could only put in a few heads of wheat at a time, and they had to be trimmed very precisely. And so I thought, why not replace the tiny plastic container of the coffee grinder with a really big plastic container, and why not replace the tiny blade of the coffee grinder with a really big grinder. And so I'm going to process this down a little bit more, and we're going to see if we can get it down to its component parts, and then I'm going to use this regular standard household fan here to winnow the wheat. So I have the fan on and running at full power. It's rigged up with the direction of the wind, just to kind of help it out there. At this point, there's going to be a lot of dust and stuff kicked up when the process starts, and so I want to make sure that I'm not breathing in any more than it's necessary. I also have set a pretty short length here on the weed whacker, because it's a small area and I want to make sure I'm not flinging anything out. So here we go. What I'm finding already is that it's best to keep the weed whacker down low. You see there's a lot of material flying out, but what's flying out, obviously you want to try to limit that as much as possible. What's flying out, you can see, is really just chaff. There's not a lot of wheat berries that's flying out. I'm sure we're losing something in this process, but I don't think it's significant. So now that our material is ground up, you can see it's got a nice loose consistency. Everything's been broken up. We're gonna start winnowing the wheat. I'm looking through here. I don't see a whole lot of intact heads, and that's kind of what you're looking for. If you see intact heads, you need to keep going. I'm sure there's some left in here, but we can process those down further. So pretty much I've got the fan propped up on a stump here. The fan is set on high. I'm gonna go back and forth between two containers, pouring the material through. It's almost a bit like gold prospecting or gold panning, in that the wheat berries are heavier and they're less likely to be picked up by the wind, by the air moving from the fan, and so they'll drop down and they'll concentrate out. I could actually probably go grab my gold pan and pan out the wheat berries, but I think that would take a while. So we're going to use this process here, and we'll see how it works out. So I've got a small pan here set up down below. I've got the fan going over it, and I'm just going to slowly work the material through. Emphasis on slowly. Speed is not your friend in this process. The slower you go, the better. You see there's some bugs that have joined the party. And try not to let everything come out in clumps. Try to let it all kind of work down slowly. If it's coming out in clumps, then you could probably be catching some wheat berries in there. This seems to work well too. And I'm just letting all of the chaff blow onto my lawn. You know, we're trying a new organic lawn care company. Get out of there, buddy. Trying a new organic lawn care company. They say one of the problems with our lawn is, well, I don't think we should have a lawn. They say one of the problems with it is that it doesn't have enough organic material. And so we're definitely going to give it some organic material today. And I'll spread all this out. And you know, one thing that I'm finding that's helping is to actually shake and agitate the material like one would if one were gold prospecting. So to shake it up and let the heavy stuff, which includes the wheat berries, fall out to the bottom. To agitate it up. I'm just checking to see what we're losing, because I'm seeing a lot of, you know, we are losing some. There's some, actually, you know, the heads, they seem to be pretty well ripped open. I'm looking, let's put the fan on the ground here. I'm really not seeing us losing much wheat. That's my concern, but I really don't think that's happening. I think we're getting the majority of it. You know, when you see some of the heads that are still intact, you can break those up with your hands. You know, it's a slow process. One of the reasons why I did this was to test the viability of doing wheat on a small scale. And you know, it definitely works. You know, I'm definitely getting a yield bigger than what I planted. I'm going to be able to process it into flour and make bread with it. So in that sense, it's definitely a success and it's viable. I guess it's a matter of personal opinion whether you think that it's worth it or not. I might experiment with some different grains next year, but we'll see how this turns out. So I've had to stop to recharge the batteries on the drill, but you can see there's a pretty significant amount of wheat here. So the system definitely works. There's still, as you can see, some bits of chaff and some heads in here. I've been picking those out, breaking them apart with my fingers. You know, and you could go back to my gold panning technique and kind of concentrate it on top and blow it off that way. But you know, that'll be an ongoing process to get down to a state where I feel comfortable grinding it into a food product. But in terms of this being a good system for extracting wheat, you know, it's definitely working. So I heartily recommend it if you've got a weed whacker and a couple of plastic buckets and a fan.